Okay, so the big question is, should you buy a scooter, or reasons why you need a scooter in your life? Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. So let me first explain really where I'm coming from. I'm not a scooter rider per se, not into scooters. I think they're really handy as a form of transport. And I'm not a scooter fanboy or anything like that. I'm first and foremost a motorcyclist. I particularly like classic bikes, but I like any sort of motorbike really. If a bike looks good, then I think it's cool. I think it's fair to say that scooters get a really bad rap in life. Generally they're seen as devices that teenagers use to deliver pizza or commit crime, and that seems to be all that people think they're used for. But there's a lot of elements to scooters. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes. So let's talk about why it'd be really good to have one in your bike alive. Of course, the trump card of any scooter is going to be practicality. You lift up the seat and there's always, or in most cases, a really useful amount of storage space. And if it's a maxi scooter, one of the larger sizes, then there can be room for at least 2 crash helmets, sometimes a bit more. In other words, enough luggage to go away on quite a fair trip really. The downside is very difficult to fit panniers or external luggage to them. Although of course, top box is a really good option. You can definitely fit one of those. I think it has to be said that one thing that a scooter definitely is a very versatile machine. For example, if you want a really small, lightweight scooter, you could fix those to a camper van and use those as a more sensible transport when you get to where you're going in some other country, because you may find that your camper van isn't the most practical vehicle in the world to nip through a small town if you just pop into the shops or something. So there's certainly that about them. And around town they're really good. I mean, with their small wheels, short wheelbase, they're incredibly nippy. So meandering through traffic is definitely in their skill set. They are incredibly useful at things like that. And they're pretty frugal as well if it's a small bike, particularly modern ones with their 4-stroke engines. But of course, scooters come in lots of different shapes and sizes. So is there any point to the larger scooters? Well, let's compare them to equivalent motorcycles. One of the great things about the scooter is because of the CVT transmission, you're always in the right gear. If you're on a small plastic geared bike, by comparison, you very quickly get frustrated with the amount of times you've got to change gear. I mean, you're constantly changing gear on the bloody things. And something with CVT transmission, that's not happening. There isn't this constant urge to change gear all the time, because you just open the throttle and you go. Which actually is the way I ride a large bike anyway. Until I get down to about 30 miles an hour, I just let the thing lug. What's the point of having a big engine and then switching through the gears constantly like it's a 125? I just don't get it. I mean, the whole point of a big motor is to be a lazy SOB. surely, isn't it? So why buy a maxi scooter? Well, a maxi scooter could actually make a hell of a long distance tourer. In many ways more effective than, say, something like a Goldwing, and a hell of a lot cheaper too. I mean, one of the downsides of some scooters is they can look a little bit pricey when you sit them next to the equivalent size motorbike. A 125 scooter, a good quality one, can seem fairly expensive. And when you get to the maxi scooters, sort of 500-600cc and upwards, then they don't look particularly good value for money actually. But that's because you're doing a sort of direct CC comparison. It doesn't really work quite that way. Because of the CVT, they behave more like a larger bike. Unless we're talking about purely about top speed. But then, you know, top speed is in many ways these days of limited value. I mean, the maximum speed of a bike isn't necessarily a huge factor these days in choosing a machine. Simply because there's so many cameras around, Gatsos and the like, that you're not going to get up to the top speed of any machine the vast majority of the time. So if you can maintain a good motorway pace, or a machine that can do that comfortably, you know, 70, 80 miles an hour, then continental touring should be absolutely fantastic. And scooters are really good at something like that. You can maintain on a 500cc scooter a good 70 or 80 miles an hour in supreme comfort. They work incredibly efficiently at those sort of speeds. And if you compare this to something like a Goldwing, you're looking at something with at least comparable comfort, because with the footboard you can change foot position. This means you're much less likely, or it takes a lot longer to develop cramp than it does on a conventional motorcycle. And also they've got big wide seats. Again, this adds to the comfort. So mile munching on a scooter is an absolute doddle. And then of course you've got those storage advances. You've got the luggage space on most of them to carry at least 2 crash helmets before you've even thought about putting a top box on or anything like that. Passenger leg rooms is very good because you're not thinking in terms of pretentious sporters. You don't put the exhaust up high. They don't consider things like that. Well, they're building the scooter. I mean, why would they? It's really not part of their remit. So if I was comparing a good sized scooter to a Goldwing, which I'd say was better for a long trip, probably the scooter, to be honest. It's an awful lot lighter. So, and of course it's easier to dismount as you get older. Swinging your leg over some massive bloody bike like a Africa Twin or something like that, where it's really tall, gets incredibly difficult. On most scooters, of course, they're open the foot. There's no fuel tank in the way. Now, while this can mean when you're cornering tightly that there's nothing to grip your knees onto, this can feel a little bit weird. It does have advantages too. I mean, it also means they're much easier to get on and off of. You just push your legs through. It's literally a step-through vehicle. Of course, it has to be said, CVT transmission is not perfect. It's got its downsides. One of those is, particularly on larger scooters, 500cc plus, excessive wear of things like the rollers and the belt, so the transmission system generally. So whilst belt drive transmission may be more labour intensive in terms of servicing periods than a shaft drive, for example, it's an awful lot less labour intensive than a chain drive vehicle. You don't have to adjust it constantly. It's also very clean, which is a huge advantage if you're travelling over long distances. The vehicle in itself stays much cleaner. And that comes to the also big bonus of a maxi scooter. That is the amazing way that you stay clean and dry on them. The fairing's incredibly efficient and will keep you out of the weather. So you can be in quite heavy weather, reasonably heavy rain, and not get anywhere near as wet as you would on a conventional motorcycle, particularly if it's a naked motorcycle. Because you're out of the wind blast, you're a hell of a lot warmer, which if you live in a place like Britain or the northern parts of America or northern Europe, that's a hell of a bonus, because can get mighty cold. It can keep your riding gear down. A lot of people tend to worry about the small wheels that you get on scooters, and they can feel a little bit strange at first. It's not the same as a motorcycle because you've got smaller wheels that can deflect a little bit more, and you can feel a little bit ungainly. But actually, a lot of more modern scooters, I mean this scooter for example has got 14-inch wheels I think. A lot of them run fairly good wheel sizes and run fairly sticky rubber. So although if you're hitting a lot of gravel, a lot of potholes, it may not be perfect, handling is actually pretty good. One of the big factors that people fail to take account of when they go on a large touring trip is fuel consumption as well. People forget about it. They'll look at what do I need in terms of licensing to go in a particular country. What do I need? Do I need this? I need that? I need the other. And they factor in lots of costs and lots of things they need to sort out to go on their foreign trip. But they bloody forget about fuel. Well, fuel costs over a journey of a couple of thousand miles, which is, if you're crossing the United States, is easily achievable in a few days, or if you're crossing Europe, you're going to do a couple of thousand miles. Fuel costs really do ramp up. And one of the big advantages a maxi scooter will have over, say, a Goldwing or a Victorian bike is you're simply not going to burn as much fuel. And that is going to result in quite a cost saving. Well, so what? You say, I can afford it. Well, that's money you could spend on food or lodgings or in the bar at the end of your ride. So I know which I'd rather do. I'd sooner have a comfy room and a drink at the end of the day. Okay, you'd say, well, why should I buy a scooter? I don't want to buy a Goldwing. I've got a GSX-R 1000 or another litre class sports bike. What the hell would I need a scooter for? Scooters are for old women or pizza delivery boys. It's that practicality factor. Trying to cover a ride of any distance on a sporty bike is a bloody nightmare, to be perfectly honest. So if you can afford two bikes, a large scooter stuck next to your sports bike is a very, very sensible option. And if I ride my son's 125 bike and 125 scooter alongside each other, this thing feels like a big bike, it behaves like a big bike. And in terms of on a big bike, the reason you get a big bike is you're at the throttle and the thing just bloody goes. It doesn't pause and wait for 5 minutes for the revs to get up before it needs to pull away. People buy sports bikes, and what they don't want to admit is they're actually intimidated by the bike they bought. It's just too much for them. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it's actually too much for pretty much anybody on the road. But most people don't want to admit it. It's, you know, sports bikes are dying out to some extent because Gatso cameras, and because actually on the road they're crap. They're uncomfortable. They're not very fuel efficient. You've got way more power than you need. And in fact, the fact that they're fitting rider aids to the damn things just proves the point, really. If you've got to rely on rider aids to keep your bike safe, then the bloody bike is probably too big. To me, one of the big problems with modern bikes is that lack of passenger carrying capacity, whether it's from high foot pegs or a tiny pad of a seat, or a tiny pad of a seat that's also rock hard. Scooter makes a really good solution to that problem. If you've got a bike that has lousy carrying capacity, let's take a scooter alongside it in your garage, because your wife will be or your partner, significant other, is going to be very grateful when you buy yourself a scooter. She might go, oh, that looks like a bag of old crap, when you pick it up. And I'm not getting on that thing. But once she's been for a ride on it, found out how comfortable it is, she may complain an awful lot less. So you could put up the argument, I don't want to buy a scooter, it's ugly as shit. I've got this modern bike and I'm going to use it for touring. It's a sporty number, it's got a whacking great big engine, so I'm going to use it for touring. So if we compare them side by side, well, obviously you're going to get higher speed out of the bike, although there's that much use. Nope. In terms of carrying capacity, I mean, your argument would be, well, I can stick throw over luggage, or I can fit hard panniers. Now, the downside here is that external luggage generally isn't particularly waterproof. It also adds a lot to the bulk of the side of the vehicle, so you suddenly become a lot wider. Now, whilst that does aid visibility, you could argue, it also makes that nipping in that traffic, if you hit the motorway, a bit more mature, because suddenly you've got a fat old ass on the bike. And I don't mean the wife, obviously. You'll find a lot of bike makers will provide luggage for the vehicles, but you'll tend to notice that those saddlebags are pretty darn small, and the carrying capacity, particularly in terms of weight, isn't great. The reason you don't tend to get really heavy luggage frames and things like that attached to bikes is because they're rear subframes. Quite often, particularly if it's a sportier bike, so if it's a sports bike, whatever it may be, you can guarantee that that rear subframe is made of pretty lightweight material to keep the overall weight of the bike down. Now that doesn't matter normally, but as soon as you start chucking throwable luggage, a passenger on the back, there is a pretty good chance that you're actually going to break that rear subframe, particularly over bumpy roads. If you look at the capacity of most top box systems, the maximum weight is only about 5 kilos, something like that, so it's not massively heavy. And the reason for this is simply because they're worried about its effects on that rear subframe and making it fail. But also because the effects on balance too. The more weight you're sticking externally, then obviously the less balanced the vehicle is going to be. Well, before you start with the scoot, before you put any luggage of any sort on, you've got a lot of literage of storage space under that, so you get a big tent. You can certainly get enough stuff for a week, a long weekend, or a week probably, under that seat, no problem at all. If you go into a dealership when you buy a motorcycle and you specify the hard luggage, the heated grips and all that sort of stuff, it's going to cost you thousands extra on top of the price of the vehicle. And then the other thing, of course, what we've got to factor in when we're talking about carrying luggage, whether it's on a wing or any vehicle really, any two-wheel vehicle, is crosswinds. If you then add large panniers and a large box on the back, luggage to that vehicle, whether it's soft or hard luggage, that's going to look like a bloody parachute, and it's all on the back of the bike. The result of this is I'm speaking from quite a lot of experience, when you're crossing a bridge or something like that, on a large touring bike with lots of luggage on, you can feel like a bloody pendulum in the wind. The thing's just swinging around behind you. Not pleasant at all. I think just to prove a point today, I'm out riding. It's actually quite cold and it's really windy today. As you can see, the cameras are being blown around. I'm not being particularly blown around. The fairing is protecting me really well. And when I've been across crosswinds, the bike has not been affected hardly at all by the crosswinds. When I was on the motorbike yesterday, that was much more affected by winds of, I would say, about the same strength, to be honest. The other thing I'm noticing, I'm an awful lot warmer as well. I have fitted heated grips to this one, but they're not actually particularly powerful heated grips, they're just gently warming the thing up. And to be honest, I could probably switch them off and be okay, because the fairing does such a great job of channeling the cold air away from me that I'm suffering from the cold an awful lot less than I would be if I was on a bike. Now, I'm fully aware that most people are just going to probably not look at this video. Probably most people are going to think, well, bullshit, I'm just going to ride a bike. What I would say is, go out and test ride a decent sized scooter and do a good few miles on it. Maybe on a day where the weather's not so great or something. And probably you'll see what I mean then. And the best thing to do actually is, when you go for a test ride on one, is go for a ride to the dealership on a conventional bike. And then when you jump back on your conventional bike, when you've finished your test ride, the first thing you're going to notice is, where the hell's all the wind come from that's blowing around my legs? And the fact that you've got to change gears suddenly becomes a major pain in the arse. And of course, we're now living in a period where fuel prices are going bloody astronomical, aren't they? A scooter makes a great alternative to the car. If you've got a car-bike combination, because it's going to be a lot more fuel efficient than your car's going to be, absolutely guaranteed. In fact, even if you've got an electric car, I dare say, particularly if you're using those high-speed chargers, that one of these things is actually going to be cheaper to run and insure. And the other advantage, of course, compared to a car is you ain't going to be sitting in traffic. So overall, would I say, as a person, you need a scooter in your life? I would say, yeah. Yeah, you do, because it'll do all the things that you do not want to do with your other types of vehicle. It'll go out and do the deep down and dirty work that you don't want your bike to do. It'll tour as effectively as a really much bigger bike. And when it comes to commuting, it's going to be better to commute on a scooter than either a motorcycle or a car. So do you need a scooter in your life? You bet your ass you do. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, thanks for watching.